Assalamu alaikum. My name is Rida, and I am at the Ghamidi Center of North America. Today I met an interesting scholar, Dr. Khalid Zaheer, and I wanted to ask very pressing questions that Muslim teenagers face daily and see his opinion on the matter. So how are you doing today?
I'm fine, alhamdulillah. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And are you ready to be grilled on?
Well, Rida, let me frankly tell you, it's a part of my obligation as a Muslim. Don't call me a scholar. I'm somebody who wants to understand my religion and would want to present it to others. And therefore, I think we must make this understanding available to others that our religion is open to questions. But what we claim is that we are trying to understand it and we want others to participate in this process.
So my very first question is, I think a lot of girls growing up kind of face a similar situation of, so why is it that we women have to cover up? Why we have to limit ourselves in the sense, whereas men have a much less requirement in covering themselves up, and why isn't their gaze being lowered, given more importance to our wearing hijab?
Rida, there are two parts to my answer. One part has got to do with what Muslims have chosen to do, and the other part is what is quite natural, and the Almighty has given us instructions regarding the case of how we humans should be dressed up. To begin with, let's face it, human nature, if it's in its pure form, human nature can be degenerated. In its pure form, human nature abhors obscenity. In other words, we would not normally like to move around naked, isn't it? Whether men or women. So, men need to be covered up. Likewise, women also need to be covered up. Some parts of their body have got to be covered up if we are decent human beings. Allow me to use that word. I'm no disrespect meant for anyone. However, going by the same line of thinking, women we know have greater part of their body to be covered up compared to men for them not to be obscene. Don't ask me to go into the details, we all know about it, right? Now, that's what God's religion wants both men and women to do, that they should cover their private parts and should not allow obscenity to become a part of their normal routine, right? That's what the Quran is requiring us to do. When we move on to practice what the Almighty has said, we do exaggerate. Exaggeration in good matters is not bad. So Muslim men also tend to cover themselves up much more than merely avoiding obscenity. Same is true for Muslim women. If there is a newcomer to Islam, if there are girls who are considering Islam as an ideology, I can assure them that so long as they do not appear obscene, they are acceptable to Islam.
That's a really good answer. And to girls who might feel forced to wear the hijab, what's your opinion on that? Is it permissible in Islam to enforce it, or should it be a personal judgment on each female, and depending on whether she wishes to wear the hijab or whether she wishes to remain open for now?
It all depends on who you are and where you are living. My religion expects that I should be concerned about myself as well as about others. If you are my daughter, if you are my sister or somebody close to me, I'll be concerned about you, right? But I should not force anything down your throat. It so happens that in some part of the Muslim world, because people, men in particular, are able to force their views on others, and ladies have turned out to be submissive. So it so works out in our societies that there are men who force their understanding of how women should be dressed up upon women. If you ask me from a purely Islamic point of view, well, I think fathers, brothers, husbands should allow their women to dress up the way they want to, but if they think that there is anything objectionable, they should talk to them decently, politely, and allow them to disagree. You know, Islam would want, God would want men and women to enter the fold of Islamic practice on their own, willingly. So if you force people to do what you think is right, it's not something that people are going to adopt willingly. So I think there is a process of, call it transformation, that should take place gradually. And God tells us in the Quran that we should invite towards the way of God wisely, intelligently.
I see. And in terms of going deeper into women's rights, there's the issue of a woman needing a wali to get married. Why is that? Could you go into deeper explanation of that? And why in general are women needed to have a support of their husbands, their brothers, their fathers, whereas men don't need to have that as much, especially in the Western society where it is generally much safer for both genders. So a lot of questions arise of like, why is it that women need to be in protection maybe when they travel or when it comes to marriage and all those sorts?
In the middle of this interview, here comes a disclaimer, which should have actually appeared right at the beginning. Whatever I'm saying is my honest understanding of what my religion is saying. That doesn't really mean that I represent the views of everyone. It was important for me to say that before I answer your question. I believe that the requirement that there should be a wali or some man for a woman to get properly, formally married is a requirement of a society, most Muslim societies. It is not a definite condition. If a man and a woman are in agreement that they are going to get married, they have not done anything obscene before they have reached that conclusion. Even if they have, we're going to discourage it. We would say that don't do it. But the only inviolable condition for a man and a woman to get married is that the two should be willingly agree to this arrangement, and they both should know their respective responsibilities as well as rights. The decision should be announced before the families, friends, because you know what? A new administrative unit called family, a new family unit is getting introduced to the society. So it's really good that women should have the support of some close relatives or men as well as women. And obviously it's also good for the man, the bridegroom, for him also to have the support of his family, because it's not a friendship which is going to begin after marriage. It's going to be a new family which hopefully in most cases is going to give way to kids who are going to be born. So you need to have a support system, you need to have people encouraging you. So it's for that reason that in most Muslim societies we have come up with an arrangement whereby brides in particular are expected to have some close relative men who are supporting her and are accompanying her when this all-important decision is taking place.
I see. And that's really eye-opening, considering most views you hear about and you usually don't get to hear about more open views on this topic.
Let me tell you frankly,
Yeah.
if I come to learn about it, I'm sure many Muslim scholars would come to learn about it, that there is a lady and there is a man who have chosen to get married and they are interested in making an announcement. It would be an absolutely Islamically valid marriage.
Oh, mashallah. And on this topic of Islam giving women so many rights, but Muslim countries in general don't have a history of upholding those same rights, which obviously you can't control what every Muslim country does or can't be held accountable for that. But why do you think that is, and why has that become our history?
I think, frankly, if you trace history of the Muslim world, and I'm always very particular that we call it a Muslim world rather than an Islamic world, because when you are talking about Islamic world, you're talking about the ideal Islamic teachings that are getting followed. There were a few occasions when such ideal, circumstances were prevalent, but in most cases, we are following Islam in some ways, and we are not following Islam in other ways. So, I have a feeling that probably it's a sweeping statement that all along the 1400 plus years of our history, women were subjugated and were not given their rights. However, it's true, unfortunately, for most of the Muslim societies of the present time. I can talk to you about my country, Pakistan, because we have been living alongside another community for hundreds of years where women were not treated equally. That community's ways and behavior have had an influence on how we behave. So unfortunately, it's more of tradition than of Islamic law that has caused the kind of unequal relationship between the two genders that has appeared. If you follow the Islamic law properly, then you will have a very different scenario. Now, what should women do about it? Well, they should become vocal, but politely vocal. I'm not fond of the kind of loud voices of feminism that are being spoken. Not that I discourage them. What I would say is that, in order for your point of view to be heard properly, without creating unnecessary stir in the society, let's talk politely. Let's give our respective arguments so that the other people are convinced, and never ever undermine the strength of argument. And the strength of argument in this particular case is the argument emerging from the Quran. And there are many arguments that can be presented for women emancipation purely from an Islamic point of view.
Okay, thank you for that. And one question that a lot of people in America I know deal with, especially teens that are in maybe public schools or have a broader view of like Western society, is they come into contact with a lot more, a different variety of people than themselves, and a lot of them therefore discover things about themselves or struggle to maintain their identity in Islam and while living in a Western society. And one of those topics, which is a bit of a taboo topic, is of course the LGBTQ community and how and if they can still be represented in Islam, and how would one go about encouraging young Muslims that are going through that dilemma.
Okay, I agree that it's a tough topic, but it's not a taboo. We need to talk about it. You know what? For one thing, there should be no barriers in discussing these, and thankfully, the debate is now opening up. For another, the normal pattern of God's creation is that there are men and there are women, right? And there is a natural attraction between the two genders which helps in men and women getting married. And the process of procreation to take place. So human race is continuing because of this equation that the Almighty has created. Now, no matter what we talk about in this life, while there are normal patterns, we also have exceptions, right? So if we have, let's say, men who are not attracted towards women, or women likewise not attracted towards men, it could happen. What should be done about it? Well, their cases should be taken individually. If it's a psychological case, it should be worked out. If it's a case of some biological problem, then that also should be looked into for the problem to be sorted out. If it's something that cannot be changed, what we will tell such people is to live with it. But do not announce that it's another way of satisfying your urges, because that's where the problem arises. Let's face it, in Islam and in all religions of the world, extramarital sex is not allowed. That's something cannot be given the right to, to operate, to be freely done. Now, extramarital sex means that a man and a woman, if they're not married, they cannot have the physical relationship be employed for the purpose of satisfying their, needs. That's true in the case if a man is attracted towards a man or a woman is attracted towards a woman, because they cannot get married to each other. Marriage, right from the beginning of human race, has been a relationship between a man and a woman. We can't change this pattern, right? So if there are some people, men or women, who've been going through this difficult experience of them not getting attracted towards the opposite gender, they should either go for a cure for it or else endure it with patience. It's a test of life. Let's face it, there are many people who are born blind. There are many others who cannot walk. So what do? We try to cure them, but in the meanwhile, we ask them to be bold and to endure with it. As for the question of some men looking like women or behaving like women, or women behaving somewhat like men, again, it has to be taken as a given challenge. We must respect all of them as equal human beings. There is no way that we are allowed to deride them, make fun of them. But then obviously, it's again a challenge, which, if you ask me, Islam provides us with a very clear and effective way for them to be able to go through this trial. They would tell themselves, they'll convince themselves by the Islamic ideology that this life is a trial. We are going through, this suffering, God knows. But if we endure it and are able to live a decent life without violating the Almighty's norms, we'll be successful in the next life. One last thing. If we do anything wrong, despite our best effort, and then after having done that wrong, we seek forgiveness from the Almighty, we are very hopeful that the Almighty, looking at their limitations, will forgive.
It's a really nice answer on that. And one thing that when I'm questioned on this, I sometimes struggle and trip over on this, especially given the history of America and slavery. So in Islam, since all people are equal, why is it that Islam didn't outright outlaw slavery, and why is it that it permitted it to be still in the cover of Islam?
Believe me, Rida, this is the easiest question you've asked me as yet. For one thing, let me tell you clearly that there is no room whatsoever for slavery in Islam. Right? Now, the question obviously you can legitimately ask is, why then has it been mentioned in the Quran? The answer is, when the Quran was in the process of getting revealed, slavery was a part of the society, the system of that particular society. And God never wants the systems to be changed overnight. Because, slaves and slave girls were the ones who were given that status because they were prisoners of war, and there used to be battles taking place everywhere, in the Arabian Peninsula. And as a consequence of those battles, the people who were taken prisoners of war were converted into slaves and slave girls. Now, the system was functioning as a result of these men and women doing service to their masters. It was not easy to change it overnight. So the Almighty chose a path which was the only way this change could have been brought about. And that was, on the one hand, Quran declared right from the beginning that slavery is not desirable. It's unfair. And on the other hand, the Almighty introduced measures that ultimately enabled slavery to be eliminated from the Muslim society, at least theoretically. I'm saying theoretically because had people chosen to eliminate slavery from the Muslim society, it could have been done easily. But obviously, it was up to the people to do it.
Okay. And on the topic of basically Muslims versus Islam, there has been a huge push of Islam and many scholars like you, I know, to bring about awareness to mental health stigmas in relation to Islam and seeking help for that. Why do you think many Muslims are against it or fear it still?
I think it's because there are many Muslims who have had this incorrect understanding about Islam, that the message of God takes care of every need of human beings. There are many Muslims around the world who think that Islam is a complete code of life. You have a problem and there is a solution already there in place in the Quran, Sunnah, Hadith and Fiqh. That's what the mindset is. So what happens is that when we have people with psychological problems, mental disorders, etc., and they come to learn about the fact that there are new developments in medical science, in psychology, etc., which enable us to overcome these problems more effectively. Well, there are some people who feel as if our ideology, God forbid, is going to be defeated if we accept any such notion. The fact of the matter is that the Almighty has given in His religion guidance which enables us to come close to God, to become better humans, to be able to worship Him properly, to be able to get purified physically in matters of edibles and morally. That's what the subject matter of religion is. God's message is there for us to be able to live this life in a way that we're going to be successful in the next life. It does not claim that it's giving answers to each and every problem that humans confront. God has given us enough intellect for us to employ it properly and to find solutions. So that's why, there are people who think that if we are going to go for mental cures, of mental disorders and psychological problems, it's going to be something against Islam.
That's a really well put way of saying that. Thank you again for listening to my questions and
Thank you, Rida, for coming
answering
up with
an open mind. And inshallah, I look forward to meeting with you again.
I will, but let me clarify.
Yes.
I'm not claiming what I'm saying is absolutely right or convincing, but I hope that as a consequence of this discussion, we at least are letting people know that we can discuss so-called difficult questions about Islam.
Okay, yeah, that's a really important notion, and a lot of these issues are stuff that Muslim teenagers and youth are facing, but a lot of times it's not talked about enough. So thank you again for answering it and having an open conversation and leading the path of having more discussions on these topics. Inshallah, I look forward to seeing you again.